Hello, hello. I'm Linden Tibbets, CEO and founder of IFTTT. Welcome to our Ask Me Anything, an ongoing series for us. We've had, I think, 3 prior Ask Me Anythings, and we've gotten a whole lot of good feedback. So I appreciate everybody for tuning in. We'll open it up to questions here in a second, but want to make sure and get a few of the kind of start of the show reminders out of the way. I think one of those is please subscribe to our YouTube channel to get updates for future videos, future Ask Me Anythings. If you've got a question that I didn't answer or want to follow up to something we discussed during today's session, please hit me up on Twitter. I'm at Tibbets, at LTIBBETS on Twitter. Happy to answer any questions or concerns or feedback you might have. And some of what we covered in some of the past Ask Me Anythings. We covered how the business works, some of the differences between how we charge businesses at the developer level for $199 flat a year, and then how some of that then jumps into a per user fee as people look to integrate what we call Connect and some of the embedded experiences that we provide. We also went through some of our initial plans for what we call the Pro plan or Pro tier for individual users. It's something we're actually hard at work on right now. And we're really excited to introduce what some of the essentially most requested features from users have been, frankly, over the last 10 years, but especially here in the last year or so. Things like multiple actions, something what we call queries, something else we call filter that should allow people to create much more powerful applets with things like conditional logic and so on and so forth that have been really top of mind for a lot of our kind of most engaged users or most professional users for a very nominal monthly fee. So that's something that's right on the horizon. Happy to take questions on that, but wanted to at least kind of cover some of the ground we've covered in the past right out of the gate, just in case those are some questions that people have today that didn't have a chance to tune in the last couple times. So with that, we'll open it up to the first set of questions. Excited to hear from folks and fire away. So right out of the gate, Stuart, thanks for the comment. Glad you watched the previous 3 and you weren't so bored out of your mind that you're here for the 4th one. So I'm grateful. It means we're doing something at least okay. Always open to feedback on how we could do these things better. We've gotten a lot of value just in terms of tuning back into what people want, as a business and as a company. So really appreciate that you're here again. And then Stuart, you're asking Peter a question about DNS failures for webhooks. Maybe just contact me on Twitter and I'll either open a ticket with our team or look into it personally. Hello, Moose. Awesome username. Hello, Reddit MC again. Good to see you again. And hello, Samuel from Switzerland. Hello from Vancouver, Twilight Linkable. And let's see, Ironofino Productions is asking about Google Nest products. When can we see integration? So we still have integrations live, what we call in IFTTT World services for the Nest thermostat, what is now Nest Cam or Drop Cam, and the smoke detector. There's a problem with those. IFTTT, along with all the other Nest API consumers, kind of got hit with a bad user experience where if you haven't connected those services in the past, if you essentially hadn't OAuth your Nest accounts to IFTTT in the past, you can no longer connect those. And there's also this huge hassle where if you upgrade your Nest account to a Google account, either way, to be really honest with you, I think the Google folks, with some of the best intentions, ended up making the user experience, frankly, pretty shit. And they know that, but I think they have some good intentions, and it's one of the things that we're in active conversation with them. Would love to see be a better experience, because at the end of the day, if you're plugging your thermostat or your camera into the internet, you should have the freedom to decide what those services integrate with and where that data goes. And I think that's something that people should be advocating more and more for. And I think companies like Google and others over time will have no choice but to listen to their users about that. So would love to see them do that and make some quick changes there. So Brian Goldberg is asking, we're asking the same question. How do we get support back for Nest? Yeah, pressure Google. Tell them, not just that you want your Nest products to work with IFT, but that you want your Nest products to work with other stuff, right? It's your product. You paid for it. It's your data. You should have the right to decide where it goes and what it can do for you. So that's one where we'd love to participate in that. Google has certainly heard that from us, but I think hearing it from users often is more meaningful. At the end of the day, it's users and customers that can really move mountains. Hello, Luca from Italy. Twilight Linkable is asking, what is reload or ping rate for webhooks? Looks like you've got a Twitter and Discord connected via webhook. I'm not sure how often the updates are sent out. So the updates are largely dependent on which trigger you're using. And this makes this a little hard to explain, but for webhooks, it can really kind of work in two different directions. You can have a webhook trigger in which you're essentially responsible for telling us when something new has happened, and that should work. We should be acting on that within milliseconds, maybe hundreds of milliseconds in some cases. And then there's actions, where those webhook actions are largely dependent on how fast the other trigger works. So in your use case, if you're using Twitter with a webhook action, Twitter and the Twitter trigger is really the limiting factor. And because Twitter's API doesn't work from a real-time perspective, we're not a Twitter client, so we don't integrate with their kind of streaming API, which is much faster. It could take anywhere from a few minutes to, I think, up to an hour before some of that works. It's one of the things we actually are looking to address with our Pro plan, is giving folks the option to upgrade to Pro. And for any of those trigger-based applets that are polling, that have this kind of minutes to hours delay, we'll actually do the work on our end to make that a much better experience. I think what we're going to start with is within 5 minutes, and maybe even shorten that window, essentially guaranteeing that things can run a lot faster. But it's, ultimately everything should work as close to real time as possible. And some of it's just limited by when different APIs are implemented and what types of technologies or kind of ways that they set those APIs up in the first place. Cool. Let's see. Don, sounds like you got your Nest fixed. That's good. Iorfino Productions, probably pronouncing that wrong. You're asking what you can do to support us. So, frankly, just this. We love to hear from users. We really appreciate, and I think we're trying to get much better at tuning in and reacting to what we hear from folks. One of the things that actually happened over the last, I think, 10 days now, a couple weeks, was we actually sent out an email survey to users and just got an incredible number of responses. I think we got, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of responses from folks. And, the survey was really just a question on what users wanted to see next. And we were trying to, kind of pick from what we heard directly from folks in the past. And just the sheer amount of responses and some of the honest feedback we got was incredibly helpful. I think to read some of those responses, just so folks are aware from the survey, I think the number one response was people asking for multiple actions in an applet, which we're stoked to say is going to be part of Pro. This idea of queries and conditional logic was number 2, also part of what we're doing for Pro. Number 3 was multiple triggers per applet. And that's one that we're not supporting out of the gate with Pro, but we're I think very open and trying to figure out, okay, what are the exact use cases that people are looking to create with this, and how can we better support that? Because I can see why. Well, hey, if we have multiple actions, how come we don't have multiple triggers? And that's a good point. It's something that we need to look into and kind of do some more research on and try to support. So those are the top 3. So long answer to your question. just keep filling out those surveys. Keep giving us your feedback. We love it. Let's see. Next question is from Blake. Asked, what happened with Smart Life Tuya people and the disconnect, but immediate reverse? And should we be concerned it may happen again, but for good? So that was something we did, I think, address and spend some time on in the last Ask Me Anything. So I think first step, maybe go check that out. I think it's within the first 10, 15 minutes we discuss it, Blake. But the short answer is you shouldn't be concerned. There was some miscommunication, some things in which I think not even Tuya or IFT, people in the community were kind of speculating. Some of that speculation even became kind of accepted as fact as we are still kind of working out how to work together and what are the types of things that Tuya wants to adopt through IFT. And we talked about how we have what is a very reasonably priced. In fact, it's really not even priced. It's more of a kind of a developer fee, $199 a year that any brand can, be a part of IFT. And so, certainly our price shouldn't be the limiting factor for anybody to work with us. Let's see, Twilight. Next question is Brian. Alexa works with Nest after migration. Yeah, Alexa and Nest, that's a specific, I think Google actually directly supports that. So they've built that directly with Alexa. It's really the, what they used to call the Works with Nest program partners that got the short end of the stick there. Twilight linkable. The trigger is when I'm posting a tweet and have that post on Discord. Oh, awesome. That's what I thought it was. And everything I said should still be true there, Twilight. Alex, great shirt. Thank you. It's our IF swag. Yeah, I think right now it's team only gear. We don't have a whole lot of them in the wild, so you could say they're limited edition. Let's see, Rick, you're saying you're getting nothing from DOS keyboards as far as help with IFT and their 5Q connected keyboard. Yeah, in fact, this is the first I've heard of any kind of trouble from the DOS folks. What I'll do is I'll take an action item to reach out to them or have someone on our team reach out to them and see what's up. So hopefully there's no changes on our end that are making it difficult for them to support you through IFT. We'll take a look at that. Twilight Linkable asking how much is Pro? We're not ready to say definitively yet, but one of the things that we think is the right approach is to frankly, to let users set their own price, at least for a limited amount of time. We believe, I think when we started some of the initial work on it, we'd love to get to something that we think is valuable enough for users to pay, even $9.99 for. But we also admit that it may not have all the features. It may not be as polished and everything that people are going to want right out of the gate. And so as part of our effort to really kind of evolve the Pro plan based on your feedback, we want to launch with something in which people are able to kind of have a lot more flexibility to take a look and say, hey, this is worth this much to me now. And we're of course going to ask you, well, what do we need to add to make it worth, $9.99 or more per month? But I think that allows us to really start a dialogue, frankly, with some of our most loyal users, help turn them into customers. We think that relationship between a business and customers often helps hold, frankly, us accountable to do the right thing by you. And it's one that we want to invest in over time. So we're starting with something we think, at least we're not ready to say 100% yet, that allows people to set their own price right out of the gate and gives us a lot more feedback about what we need to add and what the right value is that we should be providing. Stuart, you're asking about an applet with Google Assistant that has spoken text sent via webhook. Is it possible to send a reply back from my server to be spoken by Google Assistant? That's an interesting one. I think that could be possible with a combination of Pro. So we have this idea of queries, and we probably need to add a query to the webhook service, which we should do. So it might not be possible right out of the gate, but you can imagine, a trigger from Google Assistant. You say something to Google Assistant, it runs a query to your server via webhook that gets text back, and then you can use that text to respond via Google Assistant. I don't think there's a Google Assistant action that just speaks the text, but you can change the text that the assistant relays back, I think, based on running an action with certain configurations in the field. So that's a really cool idea, because I can see a lot of fun use cases and really useful use cases built out of that. We need to, I think, get cracking on building queries into webhooks in the same way that we have triggers and actions as well. Let's see, RadNMC is saying, I have a 2U-based smart power bar connected via Brilliant Smart Service. There's a shortcut set so that I can turn the power bar off entirely with Assistant, but it only turns off a few switches. Is that shortcut? It looks like you're following up. There's another, are these issues with Nest about, oh, that's a separate question, RadNMC, sorry. I guess the question I have for you in response, and maybe this is a good one to follow up on Twitter with, is if you're saying it only turns off a few switches, would you expect it to turn off all of them? I don't know enough about how that power bar works to give feedback on it, so I'd probably need to ask a few more follow-up questions to be helpful there. Your next question, RadNMC, was, are these issues with Nest just about the camera's thermostats, or this affect Nest Home as well? Just got my Nest Mini from Spotify. My understanding is that, when we talk about any kind of issues with Nest, those are all centered around what historically have been called the Nest products. What Google has done over the last year or two has kind of blurred the lines between what was originally Nest, even before the acquisition, thermostat, smoke detector, and then the camera. I think they had a doorbell and a couple other products as well. So when we refer to Nest, we're still kind of referring to that version of what Nest is. They've now put it all together. So there's things like the Nest Home, which is basically Google Assistant, and the speaker in a product. I think there's also a Wi-Fi router or a base station that has the Nest label as well. And those are kind of like new Nest products. And those, if those all already work with IFTTT, they should be just fine. It's largely the works with Nest and kind of legacy Nest products that we've run into this problem with, and other works with Nest partners have that same problem as well. Todd Powers is asking, I really like to have multiple ifs. If this and this, awesome. That's exactly what we're working on with Pro and the introduction of what we call queries, filter code, and multiple actions. We're not going to have multiple triggers right out of the gate, but you should still be able to do some pretty powerful conditional stuff, calling other services and making decisions right out of the gate. So excited to see what you think of that when we launch it. Dolly, hello from Texas. Hello, I'm originally from Texas, just south of Dallas. So been out here in California for 20 years, maybe long enough to say that I'm from California, but maybe I'll never be from California. I think I'll always have to be from Texas. So hello from the Lone Star State. Blake, thank you. Don has an example. If temperature outside is lower than temperature inside, and the temperature inside is greater than 22 degrees Celsius, to turn on the fan. That's an awesome example. Perfect. I really want to make sure we support that. If not right off the bat with Pro, then shortly thereafter. So when you take a look at what we launch here in the coming weeks with Pro, let us know if there's something missing that's going to either make that use case possible or easier to accomplish, and we want to try to address that. That's a great use case. RadNMC says, oh, you're answering Todd Powers' question. Thank you. Hugh says, how about an IFTTT virtual switch detectable by both Alexa and Google, like a SmartThings switch? One of the things we talked about in previous AMAs has been, an IFTTT founding principle to remain neutral. And I think part of that means we're very hesitant, if not outright, against building our own hardware, or frankly, building our own anything other than IFTTT. Our mission is to help everything work better together. And the second that we start being a thing or being a service, we start to compete with the other services on the platform. And we think that is overall a net negative, both for the other services and then also the users. And I think you're starting to see some of the results of folks that think the opposite in that regard. Folks like Apple and Google and Amazon you're starting to see some of the repercussions of those decisions. Again, I don't think any of those companies are bad or evil or kind of mean-spirited, as much as those types of decisions to compete directly with things on their ecosystem over time, frankly, lead to, I think, worse user experiences long-term. Maybe short-term, they could be a little bit better in some cases, but we just don't think it's the right way to do things. Let's see, Samuel, I missed the conditions for triggers if all are true. So that's something we're working on now. Excited to see what folks think about it right out of the gate when we launch it. Quiyu Chin, maybe pronouncing your first name there wrong, I'm sorry. Hi, I'm new to IFT, and so I'm still confused about the difference between applets and connections. What can a connection do beyond an applet? So yeah, if you were to only know one thing about IFT, is that we help users create applets. We have some work to do to kind of disambiguate applets and connections. From an end user standpoint, the experience of turning on an applet or a connection is largely the same. It's basically some type of value prop, a set of services that it works with, and an on and off switch. Where it becomes a little bit different is connections can live both in the IFT app, but they can also live in other services experiences. So think of it as kind of like the PayPal button for integrations. So a connection can be presented, for instance, one of our customers, iRobot, just launched a huge and really beautiful app redesign a couple of weeks ago. And as part of that, they've integrated a number of connections as just integrations within the iRobot app. And so that's a different place in which users can turn them on and without initially having to even have an IFT account. The other difference between applets and connections really pertains to what brands can do. So right now, a connection is only something that a brand, essentially a paying branded customer on the IFT platform can create. And they're much more developer focused. They allow for pretty much, almost unlimited possibilities relative to what integration you're building. They use triggers, queries, and actions as kind of the building blocks, but they're not limited to kind of a strict if this then that type structure. Now you can build if this and that things with it, but you can go well beyond that. And because it's really focused on a developer audience, an audience that knows how to code, has their own backend services and APIs already, we're able to kind of offer something that's much more a developer tool than an end user tool. What we're doing with Pro is on the applet side, we're trying to bring some of those features that we've developed for very specifically developers at other brands and services to end users in a way that doesn't necessitate their ability, or doesn't require their ability to code or have a backend service necessarily. That's a good question, and we need to do a better job of kind of disambiguating those two ourselves. Stuart, great, thank you. Don says, hope you have a Pro Lite tier. The 300-year, $10 a month entry level makes it useless. Certainly, and that's one of the reasons why, I think we want to hear from you. What do you think the right price is out of the gate? We're so lucky that we've had so many people use IFT over the years. I think we're now past 22 million IFT users. And so we don't want to pretend like we know what's best and we have all the answers. We do think we can make something that's as valuable as $10 a month. But we know that it takes two to tango, frankly. And the most important party in that is the customer. So we want to hear from you. What does it take? And out of the gate, if you think what we have isn't worth $10, what is it worth? And I think allowing people to set their own price is going to be hopefully a great way for people to kind of be in dialogue with us on that. Kieran is asking, when do we get WhatsApp automation? Yeah, so I would love to integrate with WhatsApp. I think it's one of the things where, I think WhatsApp has probably been pretty principled in terms of avoiding too much integration. I think they've been very focused on being kind of a secure messaging platform. I'm sure that's changed a little bit now that Facebook is more involved. But they're like anybody else are welcome to get started. If you know anybody at WhatsApp, please either direct them to me or to our plans page. Would love to work with them. Neekster is asking, one trigger, multiple things. Pro plan, it's coming. We're working on it. Short answer. See, Dolly is asking, I think this is Dolly from Texas, is asking, as a volunteer for a large animal shelter, you are recommended if to collect input, Indie, FB, Facebook, Reddit, security cams, etc., combined into one notice. How can I, as a tech challenge person, do this? I think we can help here, but Dolly, I think I'm going to need probably a number of follow-up questions to really fully answer this. So maybe hit me up on Twitter, @LTibbets on Twitter, and I can ask you a few more questions there and see if we can't get you a good answer, or at least point you in the right direction if we can't help. Ratted MC, cool. Yep, chat limit. Sounds like you have a shortcut in Brilliant that is triggered by IFT. Got it. And that shortcut in Brilliant turns on everything off as expected. We use IFT, it only turns on a few of the switches. Oh, it only turns off a few of the switches. Huh. That seems like a bug. Send me the applet ID and we'll look into that and see if we can't get to the bottom of it. So it sounds like there's a specific applet that's not working as you expected. Hugh, you're saying not a real switch, a virtual switch. Oh, huh. I'd love to hear more about that. Maybe I misinterpreted. I guess, what do you mean by virtual switch? Todd, multiple ifs use case. When I'm returning to my apartment, I want my phone to tell me whether I should park in the garage, rain or snow within the next 24 hours. Oh, that's an awesome use case. Okay, Todd, I think I understand. I believe we should be able to support that right out of the gate with what we're calling queries. And it's maybe always kind of worth reiterating how some of this works. And I know hand waving this is going to be hopefully a lot easier to understand when you just see it. But what we're proposing is introducing queries and multiple actions and filter, but still just one trigger. So the trigger in your use case is still when I'm returning to my apartment. So my guess is that's probably location of some sort. And then a query is go out and get more data from some other service. In this case, the weather service seems like if you want to know if it's raining or snowing, you get the current forecast from the weather service, then you come back, and then you evaluate that in the filter section. And then based on that evaluation, is it raining, is it snowing? You either run all or one or none of the actions that you've set up. So I think your use case that you're describing, if I'm understanding it correctly, should be supported right out of the gate. And it's queries, not multiple ifs, that I think is kind of the deciding factor there. Thank you, Dolly. Kuyu, thank you. Blake's asking, is there a way or upcoming way to trigger Alexa routines from IFT? So that would be one. I'd love to see us work more with some of the routine stuff. Alexa, I think, has done a pretty good job over the years updating their IFT integration, and they do an excellent job of kind of monitoring it, or really on top of any kind of hiccups or service problems. So would love to see them add that action for routines, because we think we could really help them expand the number of things that users can do with Alexa routines. And we don't view Alexa routines as competitive really in any way. We always think that, IFT kind of does something, very particular, and it's our main focus area, where something like Alexa routines is very specific to Alexa and maybe better in some situations, but there's just no possible way they can cover all the bases that IFT does today. Twilight Linkable is saying, I think having different tier levels and the kind of work it like Patreon while still naming their own prices. Yeah, would love to hear more about that. I think what we want to avoid is really getting too fancy right out of the gate. We really view it as, IFT will always be free in some sense. Users will always be able to turn on applets. They'll always be able to do a lot of what users are doing today for free. I don't think it's ever going to change. But I think we want to introduce that one next step, and maybe in the future we'll have different variants of that kind of pro plan as the next step. But we don't want to right out of the gate create all kinds of different tiers and price points and feature sets. We'd love to hear, maybe there are some feature sets that folks value, but maybe they don't value the entire bundle, and we do need to break some things up. But really want the kind of the end user and the customer to help us find our way there over time. Let's see, Huron says, I have a few sites where you just need to do WhatsApp web login and later paste a single message to. I think back on the WhatsApp stuff. So would love to work with WhatsApp. It's largely up to them and their team on whether they integrate with it. So would love to work with them. If you know somebody, point us in their direction. Samuel is saying, what is about the connect between IFT and Apple shortcuts? Because IFT is not controlling the iOS hardware. So we did used to work with what became Apple shortcuts. As Apple integrated with the shortcuts, it became very device-centric. So it was less about APIs, web APIs, and much more about things that you can do on the device. And because of that, some things changed. Their API went away. And so IFT and a number of other things that had worked directly with the brand that became shortcuts stopped working. We'd love to bring that back. And it may even be something that we, IFT, can control. You know, we do build the IFT iOS app. And so it might be one of the things that we need to address. I can see a lot of cool use cases there if we can bring some of that shortcuts functionality back. Isra is saying, have we ever considered IKEA? So I'm not sure if I know tread-free. That probably is maybe a lighting product. I do know that IKEA is very top of mind for us, and we're actively, talking with IKEA. I think we've had an open dialogue with them for a couple of years now. A big step change in that conversation. A lot of IKEA products initially were Bluetooth only. And now I think they've kind of seen the light or evolved a little bit and realized that for a range of products, you want to have both Bluetooth and Wi-Fi to really kind of unlock the full set of use cases. And it's that Wi-Fi piece or that full connection to the internet where it can really come in and have impact. If it's just Bluetooth only, it becomes something, again, that's much more kind of device-centric and less API-based. Don is asking about a timer action. In fact, timers and delays is one of the things that we hear quite frequently. We're not going to address it right out of the gate with Pro, but it's something that we want to fast follow with. So would love to hear very kind of specific use cases, how you would expect timer to work, where you think it best fits. And it's definitely something we want to address because I've heard some really great use cases so far. If we could just introduce some kind of delay or timer into the mix. Blake, more info on a virtual switch. Turn on if app at virtual switch and then virtual switch is a device set up in Alexa. That could trigger the routine. I'm still maybe a little clueless on the virtual switch thing. I would view, I think what you're saying in terms of a use case as working really well if Alexa had an action on IFT. So you could say, if something happens, if somebody rings your doorbell or if you come home to your apartment, then run this Alexa routine. And that maybe that is in your mind a virtual switch, but I think that would solve that problem. And I probably need to know a little bit more about your definition of virtual switch to fully understand. Any plans for Google Home Actions and Philips Hue triggers? Would love to see both. Both of those are things that both Google or Philips can independently control. They can add to their IFT service over time. So I'd encourage you, and both have done so in the past. I think we've worked with them quite a bit to improve things over time. Please let them know, whether it's on their Twitter accounts or through support, that you'd love to see those things added because it's a very small delta in terms of work. Since they're already a part of IFT, they just have to add one or two more things to unlock a whole bunch of new use cases. Let's see, KBCN is saying, if going to be transitioning to advanced user-like tasker, like supporting Wi-Fi shell commands. I would say, our intent with Pro is to introduce a lot of additional and a little bit more advanced features, but do that in a way in which we're not making it a lot harder or increasing the overhead for just, a regular user who's, especially, the vast majority of our users today, and they're not regular by any sense. I don't mean that to be offensive, but, they're not necessarily thinking all day, every day about how to automate things or how to connect things a very certain particular way or custom way. They largely sign up to IFTTT and discover and browse and search for things that other people have published, whether that's brands or other users, and they turn those things on. And we want to be careful to make sure that those types of folks continue to use IFTTT and get value without having to be, constantly thinking or maybe as creative as some of the other folks. I guess there's a lot of the folks here on this Ask Me Anything kind of naturally think about how to make some of their services work better together. And we want to help those folks do that, but not do it at the expense of everybody else who's just looking to turn some cool stuff on and see what else other people are doing. So Graham Brown, hello from Scotland. You're on a slight tangent. There's a comment on the impressive pile of books. Would I recommend a book or podcast that inspires you and your IFTTT work? Oh, that's a good question. I would say one of the most inspirational things that I've read that has also inspired the work here at IFTTT was actually, I've got two things for you. One's a really easy read because it's largely a picture book. But there's a woman named Jane Fulton Surrey. She worked at a design firm called IDEO. I was lucky enough to work there for a few years prior to IFTTT. She published a book called Thoughtless Acts, and they were just simple photographs of ways in which people have modified objects in their environment. Simple examples would be using a pencil to hold your ponytail up or your hair up, or like using books or something to prop open a door. Things like that, so they're in a way, they're like little inventions. No one doing those things would ever say, oh, they're an inventor, but they're kind of this window into the vast amount of kind of untapped creative potential that just regular people have and take for granted. And it was that untapped creative potential that IFTTT, originally and still to this day, is seeking to unlock. End users know a whole lot more about their current context and situation than any brand does, no matter how good their design or product team is. And if you can give them some really easy ways to adapt products to their own environment, they're going to end up getting a whole lot more use out of those products and also inspire future design iterations, ways in which that product should evolve. So maybe I'll stop there. So check that one out. It's an easy read. Jane Fulton Surrey, Thoughtless Acts. And to me, it's actually something I think about every day because I notice those small things like everywhere I go. And it's just kind of endless fun finding them and pointing them out. Let's see. Oh, Stuart's asking, when is Pro going to be available? We're being a little cagey on the date because we don't want to promise anything and not deliver on that date. But it's a matter of weeks, not months. We're really, I think you'd be surprised if it wasn't going to happen in September. So we're very close, and it's looking really, really good. We've had a number of folks, probably some people here in this session that have beta tested it, given us a lot of good feedback. I think we're extremely excited to see what everybody else thinks about it as well. So let's see, Birdie Zero is asking for more descriptive errors for webhooks. Yes, we actually just fixed a couple of problems with webhooks that some users helped us identify. I'd love to hear, Birdie, maybe over Twitter, some more details there. I totally agree that we need to do a better job of giving folks that are trying to kind of hack some of this stuff together, better input and output in terms of problems or things that they may need to change to make something work the way they want it to. And that's something we want to invest in. So just give me some more detail there. Oh, Michael, looks like you understand the virtual switch. That's good. I'm still working on it, and maybe you and Blake can follow up on Twitter with me, and I'll do some more research and try to understand what you're getting at. Samuel's asking, will an Alexa talkback action be available with queries? I know Alexa has an action that is basically kind of like a notification. Send, essentially ask Alexa to say a certain thing or deliver a message. I'm not sure if queries are going to be available right out of the gate, but it's something, I'll make sure and mention next time I sync with the Amazon folks. And I would encourage you to do the same on Twitter or wherever you might be able to communicate with them. See, Don is saying, can IFT be triggered by a Siri shortcut or Apple shortcut so I can finally turn on and off devices that are not HomeKit compatible? So we covered this a little bit earlier on in the session. We don't have a direct integration with shortcuts today. If you search IFT and Siri shortcuts, I think there's a number of people that have hacked some things together that don't seem to be too difficult to do, but they're not kind of natively supported by IFT yet. We do have something that we do support today, which we call the, I think it's just called the button widget, camera widget, and note widget. And those are widgets that we built. This is prior to the introduction of Siri or shortcuts, but that allow people to kind of create simple buttons in the, I think it's called the Notification Center on iOS. We also support similar widgets on Android as well. And that could go at least short term until we fully support shortcuts. That could go a long way to help you support on and off for devices that HomeKit doesn't yet support. Okay, Blake, a little bit more info on the virtual switch. Okay, so this is something that SmartThings supports. It represents a plug, so it's kind of like people call it digital twin sometimes, but it represents the plug kind of digitally, and then you're able to turn that on and off, and that just syncs with the plug itself. Okay, got it. Blake, I see that applet ID. I'll take a look at it and try to get back to you. And please, anybody else that has questions, hit me up on Twitter. And I think Peter is asking for